Charles Hoskinson, it's been many, many years since I last interviewed you.
Yeah.
The last time was pre-Ethereum.
Dear God.
Before the release.
Wow.
So let's jump back in time. Let's look at your last few years in the crypto space, because you have done a lot.
Yeah. There was a spout of alcoholism and depression and despair, but
wasn't there for all of us?
No. After Ethereum, I took some time off, about 6 months, and then I was actually going to leave the space. I did a TED Talk, and I said, all right, this is my exit point. I'm going to tell everybody what the space is all about, and then I'm just going to go do something else. And then after I did the TED Talk, I got a lot of calls, and people said, you should start another company. And I said, I'm 0-2, because I did Invictus and Ethereum, and nobody liked me. So I said, I don't want to do anything more. And they said, no, go to Japan. Go live in Japan for a little while. There's these crazy dudes, and they want you to do like the Ethereum of Japan. I said, why me? I've never been to Japan. I don't speak Japanese. They said, no, they really want you. They love your TED Talk. I said, okay. If you buy me a ticket to Japan, I'll go and do it. So I flew out, and in February of 2015, I touched base in Osaka. We set up a small little hub there, and then a few years later, we launched Cardano, and that really is what we're known for today. And we've grown from 2 people to 500 people in my company. We're in 52 countries. We've done dozens of products. We do government contracting for transformational services like in Ethiopia and other places. We do identity services, payment channels. We do Fortune 500 contracting. We do VC stuff now. It's gone from nothing to billions in the last 8 years. It's just been a wild, insane ride. And I've met so many amazing people. I've gone to South Africa and hung out with the president there in its ranch. I've met crazy religious leaders. I've met engineers and technologists. Our engineering division and science division, we've written 111 papers, 10,000 citations. It's the largest research group in the world for cryptocurrencies. And it all started because I did a TED Talk in Bermuda, of all places.
Always starts with a TED Talk.
Always starts with a TED Talk, right?
Does.
And this was a TEDx in Bermuda in 2014, and I enjoyed little pink sand beaches, and I actually thought it was going to be the last time I ever talked about cryptocurrencies. It was October of 2014.
Why did you think that? What made you think that this is the end? I have contributed everything I could to the space.
Well, no, it wasn't about contributions. It was that I could contribute, and there was a lot to do and a lot to build. The issue was I didn't get along with the people. And
so I
they didn't
want
get
to
along
dive
with
into
me.
that as well.
Sure.
You said earlier, they didn't like me, and now you're saying you didn't get along with the people. What created that friction? Where does that come from?
So there was always a tension about process and ideology. So on the process side, in the cryptocurrency space, there's a tendency to say move fast and break things. Everybody just wants to release something. The challenge with that is that the person who pays for the consequences of failure is not the person who releases it, it's the person who consumes it. And there's no liability going backwards. So you get paid up front to go build some protocol, and then you sell the tokens, you get a lot of capital, and then let's say a year down the road there's a DAO hack or an issue with Thorchain or whatever. The problem is oftentimes the person who suffers is a retail investor. The person who suffers is an everyday person who just wants to use the protocol for something. And I felt that was a perverse way of doing things. And so I said, well, if we're going to do this properly, let's use the scientific method. So let's go ahead and write papers and write specifications and write code and test it properly. And a lot of people say, well, we can't do that. That takes a really long time. And I said, well, if you don't, you're going to have to do all of that, but after you release the product and while trying to repair the product after a problem's occurred. So there was a process and a philosophy issue there, I'd say, that struck. And the other ideological thing is that I've never really been interested in the developed world. There's all these markets like New York and Australia and markets like London, and that's where all the money is, so people build fancy, beautiful offices, and they put them in the Gherkin or put them in Brooklyn or whatever. And they say, oh, we're cryptocurrency entrepreneurs. And all day long, they just sit around and they talk to Fortune 500 companies and they try to convince them, change some product you have over to blockchain, whatever the hell that means, and then somehow we've done our job. And I've always looked at this technology in a much more transformational way. The vision of our company, for example, is that we want to improve the systems of the world for everyone everywhere. And so we really mean that. So where do you go? You go to the places that have bad systems. Well, where do you have bad systems? In Ethiopia, in Uganda, in El Salvador, in Argentina, all these places where there's corruption and there's voting problems and rule of law is not as good as it needs to be, and capital controls and issues with the property ledger, and the money is unstable, and it has hyperinflation and all kinds of problems. So the point of the technology we build is you don't just build a payment system, you're building everything. Once you have economic identity, once you have a blockchain-based solution with smart contracts, suddenly the same thing that can be your payment system is your voting system, your property system, and all these types of things. So I was always ambitious for transformation at a scale of the world, not at a company, not at an individual. It was never about how do we issue a token, make some money, and say, ha, we're now rich. It was more about saying, have we taken the average person of a country and left them with something that's made their life considerably better? The problem is this exposes you to a lot of risk. You have to go and live in these countries. You have to go and visit them. You have to build infrastructure. You have to spend long periods of time getting to know and getting exposed to all kinds of bad stuff. And the average deal takes 3 to 7 years. Furthermore, after you've succeeded and you built all of it, it's actually not as profitable as, let's say, an ICO or any of these other things. Why? Because it's an open system. It's decentralized. There's no central choke points or things like that where a Microsoft or a Google can plock themselves down and own the entire marketplace. The entire point is kind of spread the wealth around to all of the people. So a lot of people say, you're crazy. Why would you want to go and do this? This is strictly humanitarian, and even so, like, no one will ever let you actually change anything. And that was true in 2014 when I did the TED Talk. However, just in 2021, we now have a situation where nation states are adopting these things. We have a situation where every single reputable and disreputable place alike is actually looking at blockchain technology and wants to adopt it. So we're kind of coming into the philosophy that I started in the space with, and which is great for us because we actually have the resources and people to service a deal at a nation state. And we actually know all the people we need to call and all the regulations we need to write and so forth. So it's been an amazing journey, and I never really believed I knew academically and structurally how one would get here, but I never actually believed we'd get here. I figured something would kill me along the way.
Well, it still might.
Yeah,
Don't hold your breath. I mean, so you really found that in the early days that humanitarian aspect was missing? Because I remember the rhetoric from back then. It was all about banking the unbanked and how do we help people? Did you find that in practice this just wasn't happening?
Well, look at all the top 10. Ripple, and look at Ethereum, look at Polkadot, look at EOS, all these people who have been in or around the top 10, they've raised billions of dollars, they've built great infrastructure. Where are their home offices? In San Francisco and in New York with Consensus, all these places. And where are they deploying projects? Yeah, they have a few Africa projects here and there, but if you actually have real conversations with them, they say there is no value here. They don't actually look at the unbanked as an opportunity to build a marketplace and to build out an ecosystem and over a 10, 20-year period grow with them and create liquidity for them. It's always about, hey, look, we got Mercedes-Benz to issue bonds on the blockchain, or hey, we got this Fortune 500 company to do something, or Microsoft is now doing ION on the Bitcoin blockchain, or whatever have you. There's really been no focused attempt to try to bridge those two worlds in a reasonable way. Now, there are some ventures that are smaller in scale, like BitPesa and others, who actually have done that, and they've put their money where their mouth is. But the proportionality of wealth distribution, media coverage, every time we announce something, there's enormous skepticism in the space. They pay lip service to this idea of remittances and microfinance and insurance and banking the unbanked and how they're going to revolutionize all these things. But then we only talk about yield farming, and we talk about DeFi, and we talk about how much money people are making from Dogecoin. Are these problems of Ethiopia? No. These are strictly of the developed world. So I think there's a mismatch between the coverage, the actual execution, the allocation of resources, and the markets we tend to focus in. That said, what's probably going to end up happening is as these markets open up, they actually will switch. And a lot of people who are currently in New York and San Francisco will go to Zanzibar, they'll go to Addis Ababa, they'll go to Accra because there's a gold rush. And we see this actually in Africa, mostly in Lagos. There's a huge amount of people flooding in there. There's a lot of Bitcoin growth, Ethereum growth, and other things in Nigeria. And we see it in a few other places, in like Nairobi, for example, in South Africa. So that's very encouraging. And it's nice because we've always been mission focused, and so we like the idea of good competition and people coming in. But it was a really lonely 8 years. It was really lonely. We saw very few people from time to time. Every now and then you'd run into a Stellar guy, every now and then you'd run into a Binance guy or something like that. But there were far more scams than there were legitimate ventures, and it was almost impossible to raise money. When we talk to venture capitalists or other people talking about opportunities in these places, they say it sounds like a good way to lose a lot of money. That was literally the consensus opinion. But things have changed a little bit. So I'm optimistic over the next 5 years. And I think that's really what's going to be the dominant driving force of growth for us, especially after the next crypto winter comes. The summer that comes won't be in the United States. It's going to be in Africa and South America and Southeast Asia.
I would say that, the DeFi and all of that earning money that you're talking about, I would argue that it's more about people safeguarding their money right now. Like, it seems so exuberant and, there's this crazy boom in prices, but we're seeing unprecedented money printing from the government. We're seeing people get terrified and wondering where they can park their assets. I honestly think that the big DeFi boom is because no one's earning any interest in their bank accounts anymore. They haven't for like decades. And so now they're actually getting, lo and behold, they might be able to get 4% on Coinbase for staking things there, or they can get exorbitant money on other projects and take matching risks. But it definitely is kind of, I feel like we're coming to a fall with some sort of global event when it comes to the money supply and the need for decentralized money that isn't in control of governments. What are your thoughts on that? Like, where are we headed?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack. First off, when you look at last year after COVID hit, I expected to see Bitcoin go to the moon and the dollar not do so well, and actually the opposite happened.
Define moon, sir.
Well, so last year Bitcoin didn't do so well. Even ADA, we went to 2.5 cents. Everything in the top 10 got hammered, and there was a mass flood to the dollar. So the kind of the common lore of the cryptocurrency space is we're a counter-cyclic, we're like an inflation hedge, and when there's a bear in the equity markets or bond markets or an inflation concern, like gold, people would flee to Bitcoin and crypto assets.
You didn't see that in 2020? Because it was a steady growth.
And the first 6 months of 2020 were pretty bearish. There were days where we dropped 40% in one day, the entire market. 2021, on the other hand, was the mega bull cycle. So as the market started recovering, we went from a few $1,000 Bitcoin to almost 64,000, 65,000. So it definitely, people did wake up, and it was a lot reminiscent of 2017. Now the DeFi boom and the NFT boom is kind of a micro boom within it. I think that's mostly caused by demographic changes. So if McKinsey and others have done surveys where they said, people under the age of 30, what are you more likely to buy? A crypto asset or a traditional asset like a commodity, a stock, a bond, these types of things? Overwhelmingly, I think over 80% are likely to buy a crypto asset over a stock, a bond, and equity. And what's happened is there's been a large wealth transfer from the baby boomer generation to the younger millennial generation. And there, because their buying preferences are more crypto focused, we've seen a steady rate of retail money kind of percolate its way into the crypto markets. Now, one area where we did see a lot of growth, the second half of 2020, we saw a lot of institutional money for the first time enter the cryptocurrency space. So I think those two factors together were leading causes of the entire boom cycle, and it was a big driver there. Now, the question is, what is inflation? If you look at the dollar, real inflation at the moment is probably 6% this year. But then certain certain subclasses of commodities like lumber and other things, it's just been horrendous. They've doubled or tripled in prices. But that's probably ephemeral, where those prices will go down, but there's some structural inflation that's probably at about 6%. To your point about returns, it's really hard to find low-risk returns that compensate for inflation and then get you a decent amount, like 3% or like what in the market's giving you 9%, 12%, 15%? That's not high risk. So this crypto thing, although it's very volatile and it seems very risky, maybe its risk is comparable to the things that are inside that class that tend to get returns like that. And that's something that the market's starting to agree with. What's exciting about the developing world, however, is there's a lot of things we can do to massively optimize the economies there that can get phenomenal returns for Western investors. Like, for example, in lending, there's a lot of people, like you go to El Salvador, the day rate of lending is 20% per day. 20 to 40%. So what they'll do is they'll go and borrow $100 to buy a lot of things to sell. They'll sell it all for 150, and then they give 120 back to the person that they borrowed it from. It's 20% per day loan, and they make $30 profit. So if you walk in, you can do things like 3% per month. And it seems insane and euthyrist. Oh my God, who would do that? But actually, that's a massive discount from the existing loan structures that they have. And if you can find ways to spread risk around, collateralize that, get NGO guarantees, it is possible to see financial products constructed that have incredible returns, but also dramatically change the entire lending environment And instead of violent gangs lending money at users 20% per day rates, you have actually like Goldman Sachs lending money. And then over time, competition comes in, and as credit scores are constructed, the interest curve will go down. There's also about $10 trillion of illiquid wealth all throughout the developing world. So land, raw materials, companies. Like before COVID in Ethiopia, SMEs were growing at 10 to 15% per year. You know, and just great balance sheets, lots of cash flow, great loyal customer bases, but no liquidity because there's no stock market, these types of things. So suddenly now with the crypto market, now you have an STO. You know, now you actually can do a micro IPO at the $25 million, $50 million range, and you can piece investors together at small rates all across the entire world, like a Robinhood style or something like that. So that's a very exciting and attractive thing, and it's definitely going to be led by the millennial crowd. And as they get wealthier, they're only going to continue investing money in it. So I'm very bullish long term for kind of real fi. So that's DeFi in the developing world with identity and regulation attached to it. That category I think is going to grow exponentially and probably be worth more than the infrastructure protocols in the long term.
So I want to delve into what's in the future for Cardano, and I think to kind of understand that, it's probably helpful to actually rewind even further. So I want to talk about the departure from Ethereum and then your days prior to that, because you've been involved in crypto for a really long time, and what I find fascinating about crypto is that it's not documented at all. You try and look online about what was going on in the early days, and there's nothing out there, and I think that's by design. But I also think that it's helpful for new people coming into the space to understand what people were involved with in the very early days, because you have these people who are leading, incredible teams who are changing the world now, and they think, this is their project and they did really well. They don't understand what they came from and all of the things that they've actually been a part of. And I think that the impact that so many people in the crypto world like yourself had is absolutely a lot larger than people realize. So I mean, pre-Ethereum, you were with BitShares, right? You helped out. So tell me about that journey. Tell me about how you got into crypto. Tell me about BitShares. Let's dive into all of that.
Yeah, so, pre-crypto, it started in the 1980s with a lot of people. I'm 33, so I was born in the 80s, but I don't remember the 1980s because, I was 3 by the time I left. But there are a lot of people in our space who actually do, like Nick Szabo and Wade Dye and Adam Back, and, before he died, Hal Finney. And there, people realize, hey, this internet thing, the instantaneous movement of information would infer that it's possible to do the instantaneous movement of value. So we said, if I can send an email, I should be able to have email for money. So why don't I have that? So it was very obvious that there needed to be some sort of payment layer, payment system inside the internet, and some sort of digital money of the internet. And actually it resurrected all these things of private monies, global currencies, and international reserve currencies. And there's a lot of theory on that. Like there's Murray Rothbard wrote about it, Mises wrote about it. So there was a utopia and an excitement in the 1980s of cypherpunk money, cypherpunk cash, cypherpunk movement of value. Kind of like the early days of AI. In the 1950s, there was all these AI researchers got so excited about the prospect of artificial intelligence, and they had overly optimistic estimates. They said in 1960, 1970, we're going to have robots and computers we can talk to, and like AIs everywhere. And you see great shows like Lost in Space and so forth. And they were prognosticating a world of wonder. And it was the same thing with the cypherpunk movement. They were kind of prognosticating this crypto anarchy, and you have books like Cryptonomicon and so forth. So that all kind of died out. And then in the 90s, with the internet boom, it came back through centralized efforts like DigiCash. So what was his name? David Chaum was the big guy there. He was a brilliant guy. Interesting ideas, but the problem was that most of the solutions required a middleman to work. So you could get anonymous money, you could get digital money moving, but you needed a central ledger for these things to work. And a lot of people were trying to build their way up to something where they could get rid of the middleman, because they said that, well, we have middleman, what's the point of having this on the internet? It's not decentralized. So then Bitcoin came out in 2009, and it really showed that you actually could run at scale, a reasonable scale, decentralized money. And a lot of the adherents in the early days of Bitcoin were from the internet societies and, from the peer-to-peer foundation and for, cypherpunks that were kind of leftovers. And they were saying, wow, this is so cool. We actually solved this problem. But it had no value. And so how people actually acquired Bitcoin was they usually mine it, or people just send it to you, and it had no value, so it was basically free. So, in 2009, it wasn't inconceivable to ping someone over a message board and say, could you send me 500 Bitcoin? And people are like, oh yeah, no problem. Oh, here you go. And so I came in 2011, and I started mining, and I set up some really beefy rigs, and I had a bunch of 5850 AMD cards in Crossfire. One set would give you 1.2 gigahash, and remember, it was really cheap at the time, like $4 a Bitcoin. You know, so you're running this thing, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to make like 20, 30 grand running this thing, and I did. And that's like 50,000 Bitcoin. It's like, yeah, okay, this is great. This is so exciting. But then what I started doing is spending them and giving them away and things like that. So I bought an Xbox 360 on this little thing called Bitmit, which was like kind of like an eBay for Bitcoin. So you'd find cool shit, and products and services would be listed. And I got an Xbox for 30 Bitcoin. And I was like, yeah, this is awesome. You know, this magic internet money bought me this amazing gaming machine. I won't get rid of it now. It's like a $3 million Xbox.
You're right.
That's an NFT if I've ever seen one. You know, so like, and also I'd send it to people, sell it to people, and things like that. So, you know, quickly that hoard of Bitcoin went away. But it was that was what the early days were like. We loved the philosophy. The meetups were extremely small. My first Bitcoin meetup had 2 people registered, myself and another guy. I showed up, he didn't. So I had a lovely conversation with myself. You know, little things like that. And I never really took it too seriously. I started getting professionally, though, in the space in 2013, because suddenly after the Cypriot crisis, Bitcoin went to a $1 billion valuation. And I started thinking, and I said, well, if I roll the dice on this, it can go one of 2 ways. It's going to die really quickly in 6 to 12 months, or it's going to grow exponentially, and the next stop is going to be like $100 billion. So I really need to get involved, and, you know, worst case scenario, I've wasted a year of my time. But if I get it right, then this whole magic internet money thing is actually going to become real, and I could be at the ground floor of changing the way the world financial system works. You get that like once every century, give or take, usually when an empire collapses. So the last time was the Bretton Woods Accords in 1944. You know, after the back, you know, right when World War II was closing, and before that, you know, it was the Brits lost. You know, empire started falling apart, and so we moved from, you know, the sterling to the dollar. So it's like, you don't really, as a regular private Joe, have an opportunity to just come in and suddenly change the nature of money itself and society itself. So I didn't know anybody. I didn't know how to do anything. You know, I studied mathematics, and that's the utterly most useless thing in the world if you want to be a business guy. So I said, oh, here's what I'll do. I'll create a free course teaching people how Bitcoin works and what is money. And I read all these lovely books like The Ascent of Money from Niall Ferguson and Secrets of the Temple, which talked about the history of Federal Reserve. So I read probably 14, 15 books on the nature of money, and I just read the protocol, and I went through the source code. I had a pretty good idea how this works. So I released a class called Bitcoin or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Crypto. And I released it on Udemy. I was a big Peter Sellers fan, you know, Dr. Strangelove. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I released it on Udemy. I figured, okay, I'll get a few students. I ended up getting 70,000 students. Blew my mind.
Is this course still available?
It's still around if you Google it.
Do the Charles Hoskinson 2013 Intro to Bitcoin.
It literally, there was even a slide in the course like, what would happen if Bitcoin ever got to $10 billion or $100 billion of value? It's like $10,000 Bitcoin. That's crazy.
Inconceivable.
Inconceivable. Yeah. Sean Wallace for the win. So anyway, you know, I created a class. I got 5,000 emails, and I met Roger Ver and Eric Voorhees and Andreas Antonopoulos and a lot of other people through it. But one of my students in particular is a guy named Li Xiaolao, and he was based in China, and he messaged me and said, hey, I really like your stuff. I'd like to give you some money to start a business. And I'm thinking this is some sort of Nigerian prince scam or something like that. It's like,
just send some money to my account. I'll send it right back.
Yeah, but he was serious about it. He's like, I'm going to give you $500,000 to go start a business. And I'm like, oh, okay. But sure enough, he was actually legitimate and serious. And so I went to Bitcoin Talk, and I created a little thread. It was called Project Invictus, and it said, what will you do to what could we do to make Bitcoin crypto undefeatable? You know, what would really solve all our major problems? And 2 things came up. It was a bimodal distribution in the responses. One was saying, hey, we need stability because volatility is a really bad deal. And if we don't get stability, merchants won't adopt it. You can't use it for lending. Fair enough. Okay, so you need a stable coin. So early days, there were no stable coins. The other said we need decentralized exchange because at the time Mt. Gox was just starting to crumble and collapse, and people realized the existential problems that your largest exchanges in the ecosystem, a single point of failure could basically bring the price down and destroy the entire economy. So I said, all right, well, is there a way we can bundle both solutions together? And of all people, the very first person who replied on the thread was Dan Larimer. And he said, I'm in, I'm excited. And he had this paper called BitShares. So I read the paper, we rewrote it together.
His dad was involved somehow, right?
Yeah, Stan.
So walk me through that relationship.
Yeah, Stan, Dan, and I, we started a company called Invictus together. And, you know, the Lee, he was really clever. And so he's like, yeah, we should go, he called it straight to IPO. He said, we really should. And I was like, no, securities laws don't work that way. He said, oh, don't worry about that. I was like, it's easy for you to say that because you're in Beijing and I'm in Virginia. So no, he wanted to do an ICO, and Mastercoin had just done their ICO, and I didn't feel very comfortable with that. It ended up being 2 Larimers and 1 Hoskinson. So I took a buyout. I said, all right, you guys go do it and figure it out. So they did angel shares, and then eventually that turned into BitShares, and it was modestly successful. But Dan then leveraged that to do EOS, which was a much larger raise. It wasn't
Steam it as well.
Yeah, Steam. Yeah, he did that with Ned Scott. So he's kind of a serial entrepreneur. He does something every 2 years. And, you know, I left and I was like, well, that was really fun. It was a whirlwind. I went from like teaching a free class to getting $500,000 from a weird guy in China to starting a company to getting bought out from the company all in a period of 6 months. It's like, okay. My parents were like, so what's going on in this whole crypto space? I was like, things move very quickly here, Mom and Dad. And then a little later, I met Anthony Diorio, and we started working together with the Bitcoin Alliance of Canada, and he's the one who brought me into Ethereum. And I had about 6 months at Ethereum. It was a super stressful time. Too many founders, too much going on, too much drama.
When you say too many founders, I feel like every second person I meet is like, I was an Ethereum founder.
There's only
Most
8.
of them are not even like written down. A lot of them are unofficial. Like this has very nebulous beginnings.
Yeah, the first 5 people on Ethereum were Vitalik and Mihai. They were the very first 2 because Mihai and Vitalik did Bitcoin Magazine together. Emir Shatrit, he was working with Vitalik on color coins and Mastercoin because Vitalik was doing overlay protocols at the time. And then Anthony Diorio brought me in. So we were the initial 5. And then the first 2 real programmers we had were Jeff Wiltshire and Gavin Wood. And they came in a little later. And then Anthony and Vitalik kind of brought in Joe Lubin because he was hanging around the Toronto area. So I consider those 8 people the founding set. And you could break them into the commercial side and the development side. And I was kind of in the middle where I had some rigorous knowledge of stuff, but also I kind of had some business skill, and I tried to keep them both together like an unstable element. But it was very clear it was going to break one way or the other. And on the commercial side, we wanted to create a traditional company, kind of like Ripple, and get some VC money, build the protocol, and then release it through a not-for-profit. The anarchy kind of not-for-profit side, so just do a foundation, do a crowd sale, and release it. And you know, that's what they ended up doing. And so Amir left, and I left, and Anthony left, and now he's leaving the space. Joe left, and he went and started his own company. My whole argument was that if you did a not-for-profit, there's no incentive for anybody to stick around. And now 7 of the 8 founders are gone. The only one who's left is Vitalik, and now 2 of the founders are directly competing with Ethereum, with Gavin with Polkadot and myself with Cardano. If we were equity holders of a for-profit company, we'd kind of be locked in with non-competes. We'd only have to work on Ethereum. So it made a lot more sense to me. But then again, Ethereum is worth hundreds of billions of dollars. It's got a big ecosystem. So what the fuck do I know? You know, it's like the Big Lebowski's. It's like, that's like your opinion, man.
Yeah,
you know, so we did Cardano, and we're very happy with the whole thing. And you know, all the other stuff is just noise and drama, and there's books written and that are just garbage. It's like something I don't even think much about anymore. I was only there for 6 months. I've been at Cardano, you know, building with IO Global for 6 years. Yeah, we went to Japan, 52 countries. We have 500 people. We've written 111 papers. You know, the ecosystem's worth $40 billion. You know, there's billions of dollars of transactions that flow every day. We wrote programming languages. We meet heads of state on a regular basis. It's like, that's what I've been doing for the last 6 years. The problem is because Ethereum is such a big success, a lot of people want to just talk about Ethereum. Like, how did it happen? It's an accidental project. The only reason it exists is because Bitcoin can't upgrade itself. And it's really hard to do overlay protocols on it. Otherwise, Mastercoin or color coins or something along those lines probably would have been Ethereum. You know, if Rootstock somehow had gotten done faster and they could have gotten Taproot in, there would be no Ethereum today. But because Bitcoin couldn't act, it opened a market opportunity for something to come. And Ethereum was just in the right place at the right time with the right founders, the right community, and the right commercialization. And really it was the brilliance of Joe Lubin and his ability to market and gather adoption and build an ecosystem that Ethereum got to a point where it became a semi-stable market standard. That said, even the people who founded Ethereum agree it needs to be replaced. That's why they're building Ethereum 2. So it opens up another opportunity for many people to come in, and now that's why we have the third generation wars. And you see like ICP and Polkadot and Tezos and Cardano. And that's the other thing I've learned about this space is nothing is static. Whoever's on top is probably not going to be on top in 24 months, and everything changes. There's all kinds of intrigue. So the only thing you can have control over are principles and process. And so what we did is we said our goal is to change systems of the world, improve them for everyone everywhere. So let's go to the developing world to embed ourselves and get business and technical requirements, and let's just go build protocols with principles. Then we call it basically evidence-driven software development. So you start with peer review, and you write papers, and then you write formal specs, and then you write the code, and you have a chain of evidence all the way along that what you say you can do, you can do. It's not sexy, it's slow. You get yelled at by old guys with beards, and they yell at you with math, and they yell at you with like very harsh technical language. And that's not fun at all. But on the other hand, they make you better. And they make the things that you produce really rigorous to an extent that you have a high degree of confidence over the statements you make. So when you say something is provably secure, or it's an actual really truly random number that's been generated, whatever the hell you're saying with evidence. And then when you implement it, there's a chain of evidence that the code reflects the protocol as written. There's no semantical ambiguity. That's lacking in a lot of our ventures. Not anymore for all ventures. Like we now have Algorand, for example, and so forth. And there you have like MIT and Silvio Macaulay and all these amazing people, and they're just as good as us. They write amazing papers and they have amazing engineers, but that was completely lacking during the early Ethereum days. And it was lacking during the ICO revolution, it was lacking during the smart contract revolution, and to a certain extent, most of the DeFi time. So as a consequence, a lot of these protocols are junk, and a lot of them are going to go to zero. However, the ones that survive and thrive will probably end up going to hundreds of billions of dollars and change the world. So it's a great Cambrian explosion and extinction, and a great Darwinian moment in the history of finance, where evolution that used to be in decades and centuries is now in months and years, and an evolution that used to be done by wars and governments is now being done by private industry and free participants. And that's really exciting. It's never been that way in human history.
You mentioned, Ethereum needs to upgrade. They've had issues with scaling. They've had issues with exorbitant fees. And so they're building Ethereum 2.0, and they're putting a lot of that stuff on the second layer. There are like 4 really competing pathways. But meanwhile, you have things like Cardano, you have Solana, you have Binance Smart Chain, you have Tezos, you have all these other blockchains that are coming in and taking that market share. So is the future going to be all of these things? Can you see like a clear winner? I'm wondering whether people are still banking on Ethereum being able to get it together and win out the race, because meanwhile you have all of these teams that are hyper-focused on just doing it at the base layer, not adding second layer solutions in order to help the process. They're building it from the ground up. So it just seems like this very interesting time where everything's up in the air. We could go any way. It's just, I'm very interested to hear your thoughts about the direction.
Yeah, I didn't understand how any of this stuff worked half a decade ago, and that's why we wrote all these papers. We wrote them for our own benefits. Like, what is a blockchain? There was no rigorous, precise mathematical definition for that until Agalos and Juan and Nico Leonardis got together and they wrote the GKL model. Now I can read it and say, okay, I have a precise mathematical definition for what is a blockchain. Then I didn't really understand if proof of work actually works or not. If you talk to the Blockstream people, they say it's perpetual motion, it's a complete scam, it doesn't work at all, and they just rattle off these bizarre nothing at stake and long-range attacks and blah, 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 blah. They say stuff. Mm-hmm. Okay. Maybe in 2011, with Peercoin, and 2013 with NXT, you had some valid points. But what we did, and others did, like the Cornell people with Snow White, and Silvio did with Algorand, and to what Vitalik did with Casper eventually, was we wrote papers, and we sat down and actually built security models and wrote proofs and showed that these things no longer are problems inside the models. Now, the reason why you want to build a new engine is just exactly to your point. Proof of work will never be energy efficient. It's impossible. It's like this bizarre fool's errand. Oh, well, we're using solar for it. Yeah, but that's like saying you're using corn for ethanol. It's like you're taking food out of the supply chain for energy. You can't have both. You can't have both food and energy. You pick one, okay? So you have to use, based on the price of the asset, an enormous amount of electricity. And if the asset gets even more successful, even more amount of electricity to do this. Now to the extent of like the entire country of Ecuador or Switzerland. If Bitcoin is truly a global currency that everybody uses, you probably use all the energy of Canada or Australia or even a bigger nation like the United States to power a system like that. And you still get 7 transactions per second of performance. And they say this is the best thing ever invented and you don't need to change it at all, and layer 2 will solve everything. It's like a cult saying Jesus is coming tomorrow. It's not real. It's magic. What Bitcoin did was show it's possible. Just like when you first light a fire, it shows it's possible to light and contain fire. But that doesn't equate to a lighter. That doesn't equate to a match. That doesn't equate to an arc welder. Okay, you have to actually innovate and build and advance and think about things and grow on the prior lessons. And that's what we did and other people did. So what's happening with the third generation is what's coming online, first with us and now others, are third generation consensus protocols that give you everything proof of work gave you, but then give you throughput that's orders of magnitude higher for the energy consumption of this hotel, for an entire global system, which is an amazing achievement. And the other thing they give you is heterogeneity. And this is a very important point. It's completely missed by the Bitcoin crowd. In Bitcoin, everything's homogeneous. So your node is the same as my node, same as Bob's node, same as Jim's node, and that's a feature. It's not a bug. And that's great if you have a minimum viable set of capabilities for everybody. But because you don't have specialization, you can't get performance. You can't get to the next level. You can't get dedicated specialized actors to do things. So think of it like biology. You have single cell organisms. They can survive and thrive. We have plenty of single cell organisms all around, but they don't have eyes. They don't have brains. They don't have locomotion. They can't walk. They can't do these things because you need cell specialization in order to have the emergent property of complex life. Economies are exactly the same way. You need to have specialization within your design of your system so that certain nodes do certain things, other nodes do certain things, and then together, emergently, the system now can be your voting system. It can now be your property system, your payment system. You have value stability and so forth. So, for example, with proof of stake, usually you have stake pools and delegators. Okay, what does that mean? You have a group of people who click a button and they come back periodically, but they could be on a cell phone, they could be on a laptop. They're not really running powerful nodes. Then you have another group of people who are on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, running relays, big beefy computers, and they're punished if they're not. What does it mean? It means that if you have a lot of those dedicated people, you can also use them as network relays, as oracles, as random number generators, as hubs for multi-party computation. You can start adding all these other protocols they can run. And because they can run those protocols, they're now available as APIs to smart contracts. What does that mean? It means that suddenly you have all these other things. You have sight, you have hearing, you have cognition, you have new things the network could not have in a homogeneous model. The other thing is that because you have such a backbone and because you have increasingly more sophisticated cryptography, you suddenly means that you can have a better user experience at the endpoints. So instead of having a full node, you can have a cell phone. And you have full node security with it because you can verify the history you're getting is correct even though you don't have the blockchain. We're seeing that with Mina protocol or a protocol we wrote called Mithril and so forth. So that's really where we're at. And that's what the third generation is.
I like that.
It's cool. It's stake threshold multi-signature. It basically gives you full node security. You get a proof with a little certificate that the transaction you're seeing, the tokens exist and they haven't been double spent, but you don't need the blockchain for it. So like for kilobytes, you can verify petabytes of history. It's really a cool concept. So we're seeing an enormous amount of advancement there where you have specialization and heterogeneity and better engines at layer 1 and more programmability, more sensible programmability at layer 1. We're still trying to figure out the smart contract model. Ethereum was a global state system, so everybody knew each other's business. The problem with that is that you're only as good as the weakest link in the system, okay? Cardano's an extended UTXO system, so we took what Bitcoin did, we extended it, but it's still a local state. So your business is yours, not your neighbor's, and as a consequence, much easier to shard and much easier to scale a system like that. But there are trade-offs. And so everybody's trying to battle for what is the model of computation. Then layer 2 is all about optimization and interoperability. So it's saying, okay, take whatever is going on here, whatever business is going on here, and then take it to the next level, and then you get microtransactions and higher throughput, perhaps faster finality, And then also you can now talk to other systems. So the Internet of Blockchains idea. And there's an enormous amount of progress that's being made there as well. And you know, everybody's got an oracle, everybody's got a payment channel, everybody's got roll-ups and these types of things. And ultimately that evolves at faster or the same rate as we're seeing these protocols evolve at the base level. And they're becoming protocol agnostic. So, you know, we can mix and match. If somebody has a better identity system than us, it's open source, we can take it and put it on. If we have a better payment channel system than somebody else, they can take it, modify it, put it in their system. So there's a great convergence of technologies there. And just like the smartphones, the iPhone came out, it was so revolutionary. Now compare the iPhone to the Samsung Galaxy S21. They're both amazing devices, and if you look at the feature list, they're both comparable. There's, you know, taste and preference differences there, but it's not a revolutionary thing like, let's say, an iPhone to a BlackBerry in 2007, where, you know, one had a physical keyboard and did very little things, and this other one's just like, wow, it's a giant touchscreen, this is amazing, I can do all these magical things. And very similarly, we're starting to see that convergence of those things. So it's less about technology, and it's more about user experiences, community, and also how the community governs itself. That's really what, in my view, is going to decide who the winner is in the next 3 to 5 years in the smart contract wars and the infrastructure wars. It's how do you make decisions, how do you upgrade, how do you achieve decentralization of thought, and also how do you make sure the custodial organizations don't become dictatorial and basically take over the entire system and install bottlenecks in the system and control it. So for us, we built Catalyst, and you know, we built voting systems, and every day the ecosystem gets more and more on-chain voting, more and more upgrades, and there's fewer competitors in that space. Tezos is definitely one, and Decred and Dash and others, but for the most part, we're leading in terms of vote volume and value of voting and growth of voting and participation. We run probably the largest decentralized organization in the world with Catalyst. I think there's over 50, 60,000 registrants now, and it governs $600 million of decentralized treasury. And eventually it's going to start making decisions over protocol parameters. For example, how many stake pools in the system, or when to fork and how to fork, and you know, these types of things. So effectively it's a decentralized government. That's far more important because any technology that's good in market can be absorbed within 6 to 18 months. So it's less about what do you have, and it's more about how do you get there, who decides that, and also how do you ensure there's resiliency and reliability. And then for the Fortune 500, the governments, and for large actors, they tend to look at it and say, is it stable? Is it quicksand, or is it, you know, the change management constrained it away where there's not going to be a crisis? With Bitcoin, suddenly we have Bitcoin Cash. Ethereum, suddenly we have Ethereum Classic. This scares people. They're like, what do I do? I have 2 tokens, what the fuck do I do? And I pick one and everybody else and the other one hates me and says I'm a horrible human being. Like, I don't have time for this. I know, it's like when your religion splits, it's like, well, now we have 2 prophets. It's like, well, do you like Bob or Alice? It's like, oh God, what do? I don't want to get my head cut off. This is crazy. So that's where we're at in the cryptocurrency space with a lot of these protocols, because there's no governance system. The other thing is you can't evolve if there's no governance system. Bitcoin has been around for everything. It was the first. And every great idea started in the Bitcoin space, from side chains to smart contracts to all these other things. They were unable to do it because the infrastructure was not amenable to updating and upgrading to it. And now it's gotten to a point where it's truly a religion. You got Max Kaiser walking around baptizing people, and you know, people say the word of Satoshi. You have people walking around handing out the white paper printed in a binding that makes it look like a Bible. I mean, you've been to these conferences, you've seen these people do this. It's a crazy thing. And so when you have an environment where there's a worshiping of the original canon and an inability to make decisions to change it, it means your innovation goes to 0 and your stability goes to maximum, so you're never going to change. But if you're not a perfect system and you can't solve real world problems, like I can't issue an asset, I can't do an identity system, I can't easily do smart contracts, it's very expensive to transact, I really can't store a lot of metadata. There's all kinds of problems there that are real problems. And I'm using more energy than the country of Switzerland to run it. And then you go to the adherents and say, what's your solution to fix these things or upgrade out? You talk to Vitalik, he says F2. You talk to Bitcoin and say, you're the problem, not us. Learn the word of Satoshi. That's a problem. That's a serious problem. So I think the only winners are going to be in the 3 to 5 year period are the people who figure out how to get rid of the cult and how to get to a decentralized government that's just as effective as a standards body or something else, and to get a regular upgrade cadence. And then you can just have an all-you-can-eat buffet of open source technology, and you can take a look at all these cool experiments and bring them in and put them into the product. And I think that's one of the hallmarks of Cardano. You know, it's we had 3 pillars, and one of them was sustainability. And within that pillar wasn't just energy efficiency, it was also the sustainability of upgrading. And getting rid of centralized custodians, getting rid of centralized governance, and getting to a point where a large group of people can coordinate through a decentralized way and make decisions and eventually have those decisions reflected as hard forks, so you can change the protocol.
Bitcoin is saying we only want money and it just needs to be as robust as possible. And then you have these others that are saying we want everything in it. We want to be able to, you know, baptize my dog on chain or whatever. They just want to add all these features. And you're saying that, you know, the Bitcoin people, they're scoffing, they're saying that's a problem. I think the big issue is not that they're not incorporating those things. I think it's that they're pushing back against the people who are innovating and saying, actually, we don't need any of those things that you're adding.
Right.
This is enough. They're really scoffing at the idea that these are actually valuable tools that we should be looking into, like now that we have blockchain technology.
Right. Well, then what is Bitcoin useful for then? That's the question I always ask the maximalists. They say, well, if it's money, it's not a particularly good one because it's volatile, really slow settlement times, and very expensive to transact. Oh, it's a digital store of value. Oh, okay. Well, then you're always asking a question of efficiency. Is it worth the cost to build a system with this type of store of value? They say, well, that's a feature, not a bug. The fact that it costs so much to make it is what makes it valuable. Okay. Well, then why are all these other things that it doesn't cost so much to make valuable? They say, oh, that's because it's a Ponzi scheme.
Obviously,
yeah,
Charles.
and they just listen to this stuff. It's like, okay, there is only one true God, and his name is Satoshi. So I understand what you're saying there, but then I always beg the question of, well, if that's all you want to do, is this the best way of doing it, or is there a more efficient way of doing it that achieves the same ends? And then second, to your point, the fact that they're able to shut down a very legitimate conversation about improvements and upgrades shows you a problem of governance. How do we know the proportions? Maybe only 10% are the don't upgrade anything Church of Satoshi, and 90% are we want smart contracts yesterday. How do we know? There's no governance system. There's no on-chain voting system. There's no way to poll the public and express vote. And what does it mean to own and hold a Bitcoin? Do you have any rights for that? You know, you can build in a decentralized organization rights embedded within the token itself. But for some bizarre and alien reason, we've never gotten there with Bitcoin. So there are no rights for it. You hold it, it has value, but it gives you nothing. Meanwhile, all these third generation protocols, they're saying if you hold it, you can delegate, you can vote, and some are even writing constitutions and embedding them and so forth. So if I'm coming from the outside, an average everyday person, and they say, okay, there's option A and there's option B. Option A only does one thing. It's very hostile to any change or outsiders, and it's very expensive to maintain, but it's been around for a long time. And option B, you can participate, you can vote, you can delegate, you have a voice, you have choice, you have a government, you can debate things and people take you seriously. Oh, and by the way, you can use it to enable ICOs and STOs and RealFi and DeFi and NFTs and whatever your heart's content is. And every 3 years, it gets magically better and faster and cheaper and more meaningful, and governments will eventually start integrating it. Which one would you rather have? You know, and the Bitcoin people say, well, obviously A. You know, and everything else, we're going to change everything else. We're going to change all the governments. We're going to change all society, but we only need to do A. I say, well, how do you vote? Bitcoin, how do you do that? Layer 2 protocols, what are they actually when you dig under the hood? Very federated or highly centralized, controlled by a small group of actors. How is that any better than the BIS? How is that any better than any central bank? How's that any better than any institution? In fact, it's worse because at least those institutions as quasi-governmental or governmental are subject to audit and oversight and democratic processes. These other things are just controlled by people who are completely unaccountable, unelected, and basically meritocratic. That's Google. That's Microsoft, that's Amazon, that's Facebook. Are we getting along with the surveillance economy they've constructed and the control they have over the internet? Absolutely not. No one's really happy about that. Yet we want to just go and trade them for another group of people and have no provisions to hold them accountable because Bitcoin's not going to do it. You have to upgrade Bitcoin to create smart contracts and have all of these other things. I mean, if Bitcoin was upgradable, there would be, as I said, no Ethereum. Vitalik would have built Ethereum as an overlay protocol on Bitcoin. That's what he was trying to do. He first tried to do it on Prime Coin, and he was working on Color Coins and Master Coin. This was the obvious approach to him. He said, well, it already has a network effect and everything. He wasn't trying to get rich. He wasn't trying to issue a token. He was just trying to solve a legitimate problem. And he had no idea that Ethereum was going to be so big. Had he known, we'd probably been a lot more careful with the way we founded it and all the contracts in the beginning. It was just a bunch of people who were deeply frustrated. I did BitShares because there was no way to do an algorithmic stablecoin on Bitcoin. There was no way to do a decentralized exchange on Bitcoin. There was no way to even conceive of this technology. And as an overlay protocol, it's super expensive to maintain and has a very kludgy user experience. Your onboard is you have to buy Bitcoin, get into this overlay system, you do all this stuff in the overlay system, and then you settle here. It takes hours to come in and out of the system, and every transaction bundled here is expensive to do, and then the core developers are attacking you. Originally, when op return came out and Mastercoin was using, core developers say, how dare you pollute the blockchain with all this garbage? Go create another cryptocurrency. And they had the same umbrage with Namecoin and all these other things.
And people did, and then they castigated them for that.
Yeah, because you're a shitcoin, and you're an evil human being and a scammer, and how dare you do these things, and so forth.
Well, I think the Scott Stornetta really said it best. So he cited 4 out of the 8 times in the Satoshi white paper. It's the inventor of blockchain technology. And he said, Bitcoin got the ball over the net. People were trying for a really long time to figure out how do you have something that's decentralized that people can trust. But he says that our future is going to be this multi-coin, multi-chain universe. We're going to have all these systems. You're going to have people who say, listen, I want something simple. I just want something that is expensive and I can't really use for transactions, but it's a store of value and it's going to sit there and it's simple and I don't need to worry about delegating and I don't need to worry about governance because I can't be bothered and I have a full-time job and I'm doing all of that. So they're going to choose that. But then all of the people who do want all of that will go to things like Cardano, will go to all of the incredible innovative projects out there. And I think that he's right. I think we're moving into this scenario where there isn't just one money. We're so used to government enforced monopolies with the money supply that it's really kind of got us blinders on us all. We're like, there can be only one. And I just don't see why there can be only one without a government enforced monopoly. It's not like we have barriers, like physical barriers to holding multiple coins in our pocket anymore. Like we have phones that can hold as much as we want. Like I do not see any barrier to having interchangeable monies that all coexist and interoperate, and we can choose whichever is best for whichever purpose at the time. We're already seeing that. We're seeing cultures evolve around, Cardano, very much focused on developed nations, which is really exciting. You have other projects that have different niche communities. They're all starting to evolve, and they're catering to different people's needs, which is so exciting because we've had this blanket that's like one size fits all and you must enjoy it, and we don't need that anymore. Like that's the exciting part about all of this. We have the choice.
What's really amazing about all of it is no one seems to use common sense when they think about this. Mathematics, the first thing they teach you is the argue by analogy. So you have these super hard problems in mathematics and you can't solve them. So what you do is you say, well, what's a simpler problem that's somewhat similar to it? And if I solve that, it teaches me something about the harder problem I want to solve. And every now and then you get lucky, it actually shows you a path to solve the harder problem. So you say, okay, is there going to be one cryptocurrency? You say, okay, is there one thing of anything in the history of humanity? Is there one language? Is there one religion? Is there one sexual orientation? Is there one what? No. Human beings are creatures of spice and diversity, of life and vibrance. We always love the fact that we have lots of options. If you go into a grocery store and you only see one breakfast cereal, you say, I need to leave this Soviet country and go to somewhere that's sensible, because you'd say, I want to see Fruit Loops, I want to see Cheerios, I want to see actual competition, because maybe I wake up and I want sugar, and maybe I wake up and I want fruit the next day. Well, similarly, when you think about cryptocurrencies, because these technologies cover things that are much more serious than the movement of data packets, they're talking about the way we express ourselves, the way we associate, the way we conduct commerce. This is as deeply personal as a religion is, or as clothing is, or as languages are. There is no way you can create ubiquitous consensus on one collection of trade-offs. Every protocol has its own set of trade-offs. You give something, you gain something. For one group of people, they're okay with that. For another group of people, they're not. So what you have to accept is an internet of blockchains. And what you have to do is take a step back and start with the end in mind, the consumer, and say, what are the experiences 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now we want to see? So, for example, the concept of a universal wallet. I want, in 2030, I go to Starbucks or McDonald's or someplace, and I have my phone, They say, that'll be $11. I tap it, I pay, and I pay in whatever asset I want. And somehow they get paid in whatever asset they want. So I had tokenized silver on my phone. I had airline miles on my phone. I had data capacity from an ISP on my phone. Like, I had, fractionalized ownership of my home. That's a non-fungible item, right? Okay, I had all kinds of shit. And there's some market somewhere that's being enabled by this amazing crypto utopia that somehow transformed whatever the hell that was into euros or pesos or dollars. Or maybe if I'm doing treasury management for a company and they say something like, hey, let's take a position in Microsoft stock. Their customers are actually doing that. So when you go to Starbucks and they're buying things, for all the Starbucks in Detroit, when they're accepting payment, they're actually buying shares for 2 hours in Microsoft. This is the world we can enable, very quickly, completely on a cell phone, completely seamless. I pay them what I want, they get paid what they want. It's their business, it's my business, no one cares. There's decentralization in between. That's an end that is magical and wonderful because we're no longer then at the mercy of a Fortune 500 bank or a government or capital control or inflation or other things. I can build my wealth any way I want. If I'm concerned that the dollar's falling out, I can have tokenized timber inside my portfolio. I can do all kinds of crazy shit. And it's just there, and the cost of doing it is nothing. And it's available equally to Bill Gates as it is the coffee farmer in Ethiopia. Both of them have the same system. The same thing can be for your cell phone usage. I have a phone, and I can have a little dial on my phone, and on one side of it, I could say, I only ever want to spend $5 a month for phone access. On the other side of it, you can turn it all the way up and say, I don't care what I spend, but I want to have 5G speeds, maximum speeds, always connected, roaming between the networks for whichever one gives me the best signal, because I'm a super business guy and I need to never drop a call. Okay, well, why do we have that experience? Well, because of telco monopolies and silos and things. It turns out the very same thing. The same set of technology that allows you to have that first thing, the universal wallet, allows you to have that dial on your phone, also allows you to do the elections of nation states. So, I'm a politician and I'm doing something very controversial. I say, what do the people think? You push a button, it suddenly as an NFT, a vote token shows up on your phone. And there's a question, do you think we should do this? Yes, no. Yes goes to one address, no goes to the other address. You've just pulled the entire nation state instantly with an 80-90% voting rate for free. The same technology that enables that enables the dial, a dial enables the universal wallet. You just keep walking one after another, after another, after another. And by the way, they're all open. They're open source, patent-free, equal participation, and the economics are built in a way where the cost falls, the quality improves, and the speed, efficiency, throughput, all these things get better. And they get more universal. So that means the least amongst us have access to the same systems as the best amongst us, as the richest amongst us, the most privileged amongst us in society. We've never had a time in human history where that's been the case. It's always been proximity to wealth and power decided your status and wake in life. The further away you were from it, the more likely you were working as a slave in an iron mine. Okay? Now we live in a situation where you live anywhere in the world, no matter where you're born, with the geographic lottery, you will have access to the same system as a king does. That's magical. That's the world I want. I don't give a shit about whether it's Bitcoin or Ethereum or Cardano. I just know what classes of technology needs to be and what the philosophy needs to be. And I also understand you have to also build a government in parallel with this, because if it's a system for the people, by the people, the system needs to be run by the people. It needs to be governed by them. You need to have a seat at the table. I don't have that with Bitcoin. I have a 500-person company. We have armies of scientists. We've written 111 papers. I'm a fucking billionaire, for God's sakes. And I don't have a seat at the table with Bitcoin. So if I don't have a seat, for love of God, after all that we've done, like NEPA PALs and the improvements to proof of work and so forth, you tell me about the shepherd in Senegal and everybody else. What seat do they have? And you're telling me that's the system we need to inculcate and install and build in, and that's the values of decentralization? No, that's the values of a small group of people who got phenomenally lucky. And they are now trying to hold on to that luck and that power for fear that if they let go of it and give it to the world, then they're going to lose it. And everything that makes them special for that brief moment in their life will go away with them. And the sad part is it's the opposite reality. If they just let go and let the system evolve and grow, then we would move faster towards a world that would be better for each and every person. And that's what I think about. That's what I've devoted my life to. And now I'm in a position that we can just do this forever. Regardless if we make money this year or we don't make money this year, there's enough to do it forever. and everything we do is open source. Despite all of that, the maximalism and the toxicity in this space, to go to the negative side for a moment, is extraordinary. You know, you figure a company that sits around, that writes open source code, publishes open papers, and basically is willing to work with anybody on anything, would be a company that people generally like. Instead,
you haven't met the crypto space.
Yeah, you go to Twitter, you go to all these other places, and basically because we have the audacity not to be in one club and we're in another club, even if our club is agnostic, then we're called evil, sociopathic, narcissistic, pathological liar, no technical skills, this, that, the other. Oh my God, the allegations and the things that are said. And I always ask, where the fuck is the scam? Well, we're going to scam the world by giving away everything. We're going to scam the world by building open systems and breaking up monopolies and bringing people together. We're going to scam the world by handing the power to the people who don't have it. Okay.
And you never see that vitriol against people who are supporting government coercion and
yes.
the monopoly of money there. It's always against people who of their own volition are choosing whatever form of digital money they want.
Yes.
They're the ones that get the vitriol.
Yes.
You know, it's baffling.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And you know, all it hurts is our space's ability to operate. Because we bring people to these events, prominent people from Fortune 500 countries, heads of state, other people, and they say, what's this crypto thing all about? We're really excited. And they walk in and the first thing they get bombarded with, we're here to protect you against the shit coins. You know, they actually say this to a head of state. And I was like, what is the guy thinking? He's like, what have I just walked into? What kind of cult is this? Meanwhile, we're trying to convince the guy to turn his entire economy over to a cryptocurrency. And he's going to say, I don't know. These guys seem a little crazy, volatile, and unsavory. And also, it doesn't seem to be in my people's best interest. So, you know, it's a mixed bag, but you can't do it for love. You can't do it for accolades. If you want to be loved, you'll never be loved. You have to do it for principles and values. And that's what's always defined us since 2015 and on. We've been clear. I did it in the TED Talk. I said, this is what we're going to do. This is where we're going to do it. This is how we're going to do it. It's my favorite mathematician was Paul Halmos, and the old Hungarian Jewish guy. And he was like, okay, the key to writing a proof is you do three things. You tell them what you're going to do, you do it, and you tell them what you did. And that's what we did. You know, in 2014, I told them what I was going to do. I said, we're going to go to the developing world and build all this stuff. And now we're doing it. And at some point, you know, the world will actually know it's been done. And if we can do it, it'll inspire thousands and eventually millions and eventually, hopefully, billions of people to pick up that banner and that flag and do it themselves. And it goes then beyond any company and any individual or any ego or any particular story. It becomes deeply personal to each and every person. And you asked, you know, like the arc of my time in space and where I came from. I think that's the arc, and I've really enjoyed it, and that's what's kept me going. I don't have to be here anymore, but I am, and I stay just as passionate, if not more so today, because I honestly believe that in 10 years we will have that reality of the universal wallet and the dial and the voting system. And I honestly believe that that's going to be in the hands of everybody, not just a privileged few.
Just on the note of the universal wallet, I love that as an idea of the evolution of money, because you saw bartering systems and you realized how difficult it is if you want a chicken and you only have a whole cow, and how do you exchange? And so we developed money, and then you have to, you know, figure out as a society, like, what do we all accept as a store of value, and we kind of converge on these different things. And then it seems the obvious next step is, well, each person can pay whatever they want and accept whatever they want, but we just didn't have the technology for that until now. But there's more than that, because we also along the way had governments step in and say, oh, you have these privately issued money, we're just going to take over that, we're going to do our own thing. And it really set everything back. You stopped getting innovation in the idea of money, because when you have a monopoly on anything, you lose innovation.
Well, there's a little caveat there. So in the 19th century, the United States was the biggest monetary innovator in the world. We had over 200 private currencies that were issued by banks. Every single one of them failed within 20 years because they went fractional reserve. So the reason why governments are...
Well, the government also had a lot to do with that, because they didn't allow banks to expand into other states. They really had this controlled atmosphere that stopped a free market in banking from operating.
Yeah, but my broader point is about the temptation. It's so easy, once you have power and wealth and control over something, to violate the trust that you're given for that thing. The magic of cryptocurrencies, it goes from don't be to can't be. We say don't be evil. The United States can't be evil. The design of the system prevents the system from a failure state. So private money, you say, well, as long as the custodian is honest and he's backed the dollar and there's $1 for everything, we're okay. Then, tether happens, so these things happen. And then suddenly, well, it's not $1, but it's close enough. And it's just too tempting because the money you can make from even a slight perturbation of the social contract is extraordinary. And as the numbers get larger and larger, the temptation grows and grows. Even if the original custodians can't be corrupted, their children can be. The next guy coming can be, and so forth. So government steps in saying, well, we're here for a reason. We didn't get these powers out of a vacuum. We got it out of the Knickerbocker crisis and the Great Depression and this scandal and this scandal and this scandal. Literally every piece of regulation comes on the back, usually of a collapse.
We'll never let a good crisis go to waste,
exactly.
as they say.
Yeah, it's like Sarbanes-Oxley was Enron, and the Dodd-Frank financial reform for 2008, and then we had a bunch of financial reforms from the S&L crisis and the Black-Scholes crisis of 1987. The stagflation of the 70s led to lots of new regulation and deregulation, all kinds of things. So everything is reactionary in that respect. But the problem is, what we're doing as an industry is coming in and saying, to change the system, to win the game, you have to invent a new game. And that's what we did as an industry. We said, guys, we understand you have concerns, but your concerns are about a different game. You're playing Monopoly, we're playing Risk, we're playing a different game. We have protocols where you no longer have to trust the custodian. We have protocols where human beings can watch each other and audit each other better than you can the government, because you're not infallible. Okay? The government is made up of people too, and they can go certainly corrupt. They have many times. And so now that you have something better, it's an education game and a demonstration game. And then eventually private standards will overcome it. And this is not a crypto thing. We saw this with the internet. Every government in the world had an opportunity to invent and inculcate and bait the internet before the internet came. But they didn't do it because they couldn't understand how to build a system like that. So what ended up happening was academics from Stanford working at DARPA, they invented this protocol and it took off like wildfire, and all these nerds just kind of ran it, and eventually it grew to a size and scope and scale where it was physically impossible for the ITU or any organization to come and put a broad spectrum set of regulations and laws on top of it and control and dominate it. So private interests and voluntary actions were able to grow to the first human scale invention that infiltrates everything, the internet. That model is now being applied to money. So whether a government wants to stop it or not, I think it's inevitable. I don't think there's any way that can stop the floodgates, because the output will be so vastly superior than where we came from. And once it's vastly superior, a lot of these governments are democratic in nature. If people try to shut it down, the retribution and recourse will be so vicious that the politicians who do it lose their jobs. And the new ones that come in will basically embrace it because it's politically convenient. So I understand where it came from in the 19th century, and I think
you have a much higher esteem of those regulations than I do. You look at the reactionary nature of them and you seem to think that it's justified. In the past, these things happen that were created by government, and then the government comes in and says, all right, we'll also fix it, we'll put a band-aid on it, right? And they're going to be using these opportunities to co-opt systems where they're starting to lose control. We saw that when people went away from private banknotes, it wasn't because they didn't trust them, it's because the government started putting ridiculous 10% taxes every time you used a private note. They had to tax these things out of existence. Right. Who's to say that something like that won't happen with crypto? Who's to say that they won't come in, and sure, they can't ban it outright, but they're sneaky. Boy, oh boy, they're going to figure out some way to say, well, we'll just make it so that all the wallets are custodial, or we'll just make it so that you have to pay an extra tax, a crypto tax. They can throttle this system. So how do we make this robust enough that this is unstoppable? Because if we can do that, that's the future. That's our future of freedom, paved right there.
That's another reason why we focus so much on the developing world. I mean, in the developing world, the government is our partner. Every single one of those countries, they desperately want systems to catch up with the consequences of globalization, because if they don't, people starve to death. It's existential for them. In the United States, Europe, other places, it's protectionism. It's less about innovation, it's less about improving people's lives, it's more about protecting the power structures that exist as of today and the vested institutions that exist today. There's no $5 trillion incumbent industry in Ethiopia that we have to somehow negotiate with. It doesn't exist. So when you go in and you say, we're going to globalize you, they say, oh, that's so beautiful because we'll get direct foreign investment and everything's going to get better. Now, if you add up the developing world, all the locked up wealth there and the economic activity there, that's 3 billion people. That's $10 trillion. So who cares if the governments in America and Europe start cracking down on this stuff? They'll do it. There's always things. There's people like Community Decency Act and Digital Millennium Copyright Act in the 1990s. The NSF-AUP, National Science Foundation Acceptable Use Policy of the Internet, until 1992 said you couldn't commercialize the Internet. You couldn't sell stuff online. Okay, so yeah, regulations are there and they're bad. But what you do is you get the genie out of the bottle. You open Pandora's box, and you get it to a point where too many people are doing too many things, and the notion that these things are bad when they improve the lives of millions or billions of people, it becomes unstoppable. It becomes impossible to sell that notion in that respect. And then eventually the older politicians die or retire, and the newer ones that come on, they run on a campaign of reform and change. Governments do change. It wasn't too long ago that in the South in the United States, if you were black, you'd have to go to a different part of the restaurant. You'd have to ride in the back of the bus. And that was just the way life was. And people said, well, that's the way it's always going to be. And then very quickly the civil rights movement comes in, and the most racist places of our country were forced to change. And within a few generations, it's a very distant past. And we look at it in storybooks, history books, but yet there are still people alive who actually endured that. It wasn't too long ago that the Soviet Union was around. We have a lot of Eastern Europeans in IO Global who are old enough to remember living in the Soviet Union. And when they were there at that time, even in the 1980s, there was this perception that the Union was going to be there forever. And now it's gone. The Iron Curtain has fallen. You go to Mongolia, you go to Georgia, you go to all these places, you see all these ruined monuments. And they're actually like anti-communist monuments. You go and there's like vendors selling shit and capitalism all around it. You go to Vietnam, and if it rains, people come outside and sell you umbrellas. It's an amazing thing. So things can change super quickly on both the social side and on an economic side and on a political side. And it really comes down to this what I call the social sinkhole effect. So sinkholes never start from the top down, they start from the bottom up, and they kind of and eventually you drive and you fall into it. So you can go over the same road over and over and over and over again. You think it's a strong, normal road, a strong, normal institution, and then one day you just fall in and there's this huge ditch, and sometimes it kills you. The collapse of governments, ruling societies, legitimacy of institutions exactly the same way. The institution doesn't just magically disappear or something like that. It starts eroding over time and over time and over time. By the time you finally fall into the sinkhole, after the fact, everybody says, well, of course. In my Twitter feed, I have all these kings, and it's from King Edward, I think, V's funeral. He was a British monarch, and he died in, I think, 1910. And he was related to pretty much every monarch in Europe. So when he died, like everybody came. The Tsar came, and Wilhelm came from Germany, and so you have all these kings who have their uniforms on, they're prim and proper and pristine, and they collectively controlled the world. They had all the money, about a third of all the landmass of the world, the biggest armies in the world, and they had been running monarchies that had endured for centuries in one form or another. 10 years later, almost all of them were completely removed and depowered because of World War I. The whole system just magically changed. Now, when you retroactively look at it, you start examining it, the social sinkhole was there. Their monarchies had been deteriorating in legitimacy and control and power and industrialization and mercantilization. All these things had been fundamentally changing them in a way. But they were blindsided to it because they were still thinking the institutions they lived in were enduring. It wouldn't take a lot for the Securities Exchange Commission to just no longer exist, and for that regulation to be totally decentralized. It wouldn't take a lot for the Federal Reserve System to not exist. It was created in 1917. It hasn't exactly been, this amazing American institute. Actually, 1913. Yeah, that's right. 1917 was when we entered World War I. 1913 is when we created it. Jekyll Island happened a little earlier. But it was not an enduring American institution. In fact, we'd gotten rid of it a few times in our history. We tried to create it and got rid of it, created it, got rid of it. So nothing stops America from creating an algorithmic stablecoin and representing that as the US dollar and having it constrained by algorithms in 2050 or something like that. Maybe that's the new international reserve currency and everybody participates and we just manage the lion's share of it. Why would we do that? Well, a crisis happens. We fall into the sinkhole. But the crisis is created by the gradual erosion in legitimacy of institutions. And that's where we're at in society. Institutions, faith in them is at an all-time low. Where does the anti-vaxxing come from? Well, because people don't trust anybody anymore. They don't trust science anymore. They don't trust the media anymore. Because honestly, a lot of people are lying these days. People who are supposed to be objective aren't. People who are supposed to be honest have an agenda. No one is giving you the full story. You don't perceive it. And also, it's getting harder and harder to determine fact from fiction. We have deep fakes. We have propaganda groups that manufacture news. There's all kinds of things that are on the horizon or already here that are destroying our ability to critically analyze the world, and the volume of information is increasing. Furthermore, all the things that were hidden from us are now shown to us on a daily basis on TikTok and YouTube and so forth. When my parents were growing up, they had a newspaper. Somebody made a decision what was in it, and they would see that, and that was their reality. If someone died, if there was a collusion of a few people, they could hide that for months if they wanted to, and then explain it any way they wanted to. Now, you see it on your phone 5 seconds after it happened from 12 different sources, everyone annotating it differently, and all of them have been perceived equal legitimacy to the state media and to the mass media. When you have something like that, the institutions built under the old system can't survive. So when those institutions erode, eventually the sinkhole will fall and everything is up for grabs. The definition of the Westphalian notion of nation states, the definition of money, the definition of consent, privacy, everything is open for redefinition. And eventually we'll reach a new steady state. And maybe it'll be an overreaction and there's a Hegelian dialectic and we kind of meet in the middle after these things clash. Or maybe it's something else. Who the hell knows? But that's what makes it fun. That's why we're here. We're all pioneers on this road. We all have differences of opinion, and some are more libertarian and some are more authoritarian. And each and every one of us not only has an opinion, we have protocols. We have tokens, we have movements, we have groups of people, and they work with us to basically reflect that and build communities. I started Cardano as 2 people. Now there's over 1 million people in the Cardano ecosystem, and they're incredibly loyal to the extent that they're tattooing our damn logo on their bodies.
How does that feel? You see someone tattooing you.
I'll show you the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. The absolute craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. Someone sent this to me over Twitter. They tattooed.
Can we get it like a cutaway of
yeah,
this?
they tattooed my face on their body.
What? That's so weird.
I don't know the person. It just did it and sent it to me.
You have a super fan there, Charles.
Yeah.
You may get a few more people watching this who are like, I love what this man has to say.
That's why we started investing in a security detail. So anyway, that's where we're at. And a company's
Crypto's
done this,
weird.
right? It's crazy.
So weird.
And so you see these types of things, and it's not any different than the Apple logo or the Harley Davidson logo or these things. But people believe so strongly in this because it's not about money to them. It's about saying the institutions are about to go through a magic reformation, and I want a seat at the table for where they go. We believe in that. That's the ultimate true message. I think that's the truest thing that Satoshi gave us. If there was anything there, it wasn't decentralized money, it wasn't Bitcoin, it was the freedom to believe that we actually have the ability to change the systems that we were born into, whatever those systems happen to be.
I think that's such a beautiful note to wrap things up there. We are, of course, at the Satoshi Roundtable in Mexico. We're going to go and enjoy the wonderful festivities of the night, enjoy this group of people that I believe is truly changing the world.
Yeah.
You're one of them. So thank you so much for chatting with me and for being here.
This was so much fun. Thank you so much.